At 13:40 or 1:40 p.m., the sun beat down hard on the Virginia Beach asphalt outside Naval Special Warfare Training Center. Inside Range 12, a handful of SEAL candidates rotated through long-range drills, calling wind and reading mirage off metal plates set more than 1,000 meters downrange. Nobody paid much attention when a woman stepped onto the deck, her boots worn, jacket faded, and a plain canvas bag slung over one shoulder. She didn't wear a uniform, no unit patch, no rank, nothing to place her. Just quiet eyes and a still posture, like someone waiting for a train that hadn't arrived yet. One of the younger operators, chewing sunflower seeds, leaned toward the guy beside him and said she probably got lost on the base or was someone's admin checking inventory. She stepped closer to the firing line, stopped just behind a shooting bench, and spoke low but clear. "I'd like to take a shot." Nobody moved at first. A couple of heads turned. A tall operator with a black ball cap scoffed under his breath and looked back downrange. Another nudged his elbow and grinned like it was a joke they'd both heard before. Master Chief Markham glanced up from behind a spotting scope. He didn't say a word. His arms stayed folded, and his face stayed still. But something in his eyes narrowed. The woman nodded once and unslung the bag from her shoulder. She placed it gently on the bench, like she'd done it 100 times. There was no flash to her movement, no wasted effort. She pulled open the flap and slid out a Barrett M107A1, not the kind of weapon someone borrowed off the shelf. It was clean, custom, and the cheek rest showed wear in all the right places. She set it on the bipod, chamber open, muzzle forward. Everything done with quiet fluidity. Someone behind her let out a chuckle and asked if she knew what caliber it fired. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out a leather notebook, its spine creased from years of use. Inside were wind charts, ballistics corrections, handwritten margins in pencil, no range printouts, just memory and math. She flipped to a page with wind values for crosswind up to 20 knots, adjusted the turret, and locked in. Markham called out, "Target steel, 1260 meters, wind pushing from the right, gusting." Her breath slowed. She shouldered the rifle, cheek pressed down, hand wrapping the grip. With one smooth motion, she chambered around, exhaled, and squeezed. The first shot cracked like thunder. Operators down the line stopped what they were doing. Markham peered through the scope. One round, dead center. Then came the second. She fired again, almost too quick. The echoes blended. The spotter next to Markham blinked. Same hole. The first round hadn't finished ringing before the second tore through it. The target didn't spin. It shivered once, then went still. A gust rolled across the field, lifting dust and silence with it. She stood slowly, eyes steady, not smug, not cold, just focused. She cleared the weapon, slung it over her shoulder again, and closed the notebook without a word. One of the younger operators rubbed the back of his neck, glancing at the steel downrange like it might explain what just happened. Markham finally exhaled and muttered under his breath. That was no accident. But the woman was already walking away. Nobody clapped. Nobody laughed. Only the faint ticking of cooling metal filled the air behind her. At 07:15 or 7:15 a.m., the sound of the garage radio still echoed in her mind. It played low while Colonel Thomas Walker ran pre-flight checklists in their driveway, reciting them like a hymn. Ava, 13 at the time, used to watch from the steps as he traced his fingers along his A-10 flight manual. He never missed a line, never skipped a beat. She remembered the way he said, "Never trust an aircraft until you've touched every bolt with your eyes." Thomas flew the hog like he was born inside the cockpit. He called it ugly and perfect. His squadron respected him, but he wasn't political. He asked too many questions, didn't sugarcoat bad decisions, and more than once pushed back on orders that didn't make tactical sense. Ava didn't know all that back then. She only knew he came home smelling like jet fuel and desert wind. In October, during a support operation outside Kismayo, Somalia, something went wrong. The mission called for close air support on a special operations convoy under ambush. Command hesitated. Reports were messy. Coordinates unclear. Thomas requested direct overflight. He was told to hold position. Minutes later, his aircraft was downed. Ava heard it from a tight-voiced officer who wouldn't meet her mother's eyes. The official story said, mechanical failure, no mention of radio delays, no mention of command's refusal to greenlight CAS. Ava later found the audio logs, stored in a drive marked Flight 342A. She listened in the dark. Her father's voice had been calm, clipped, but there was urgency under every call-out. He was losing altitude. He had eyes on friendlies. He kept asking for clearance that never came. The last thing he said was request immediate fire mission. Coordinates confirmed. Then static. The silence afterward hit harder than the crash. Ava held the headset in her lap, listening to nothing for almost an hour. That was the first time she understood that orders didn't always mean right. That loyalty didn't guarantee protection. She started carrying his flight log the same week, not as a keepsake, but as a question still unanswered. The ink had faded in places. Some pages smelled like sand and sweat. Others held margin notes that read more like warnings than calculations. That book became the only thing she trusted when no one else would explain what really happened to her father. At 18:20 or 6:20 p.m., the call came in just as Ava was heating up leftover lasagna. Her fork dropped before the second ring. The officer's voice was measured, too careful, asking if she was next of kin to Julia Walker. There'd been an incident. He said no details over the phone. She should come down to the county medical examiner's office. That was all. Julia had been walking home from an interview in Alexandria. A single shot hit her in the chest as she crossed an alley near the metro. The shooter was never seen. No witnesses. The police logged it as a robbery gone wrong, even though her bag was untouched. Her coat was unzipped. Ava noticed the pinned paper only after the medical tech handed over the personal effects. A small note, square edges, folded in thirds and tucked behind a lapel. The handwriting was too neat. Across the center, a single number, 800. Beneath it, a tiny symbol, a triangle crossed with a single horizontal line. Ava had seen that symbol once before, scrawled in the margin of her father's flight log, next to a note about sniper range variants in arid environments. She didn't understand it then. She did now. Julia had been researching something for months. Ava remembered late nights, encrypted folders, redacted documents spread across the kitchen table. Her mother never told her what Meridian was, but the word had come up more than once in whispered calls. Ava thought it was a code name, maybe a source. She didn't realize it was an entire network. The weeks that followed blurred. Ava kept digging. The triangle symbol showed up in scattered military procurement docs, tucked inside shell company letterheads, and once burned into the corner of a photo of an operator in Mogadishu, the same city where her father had died. The same month. Too many coincidences. Too many sealed files. Julia's notes had vanished. Her home office wiped. Even her reporter credentials were flagged as inactive within days. Nobody in the newsroom would speak on record. A former editor just shook his head and muttered, "She poked something sharp." Ava stopped asking after that. She focused instead on piecing together what her mother had left behind. She found fragments in backup drives and auto-saved drafts. Julia had been chasing rumors of off-the-books kill contracts tied to a directive signed during counterinsurgency operations abroad. The name Meridian kept surfacing, always adjacent to deniable actions. Shadow units, and back-channeled weapons transfers. Ava didn't cry much after the funeral. Grief had calcified into something else. She kept her mother's coat in the closet, note still pinned inside, not because she wanted to remember the moment, but because she needed to. That slip of paper wasn't just a warning. It was a breadcrumb. The same hand that pulled her father out of the sky had come for her mother on the street. The pattern was no longer coincidence. It was design. And Ava, for the first time, began to see the shape of the enemy behind the scope. At Oro 3:10 or 3:10 a.m., the air inside the Joint Operations Center outside Bagram was thick with humidity and tension. A digital map stretched across the screen, topography of Karash Valley marked with red thermal indicators. 7 enemy overwatch points, 1 fortified compound, 11 hostages, and no clean insertion route. The terrain was steep, fractured, unpredictable. Command needed someone who could punch a corridor through chaos without making a sound. Ava stood at the edge of the briefing table, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs glanced up from the folder and kept it short. "You'll lead an independent sniper cell. Your objective is Overwatch disruption. Call sign Shadow 0. You clear the ridge. They move in. Time on target is narrow. Thermal inversion window lasts just under 2 minutes. Confirmed winds at altitude 35 knots from the west." Ava nodded once. No questions. By 04:40 or 4:40 a.m., the team loaded into a C-17 Globemaster III on the south ramp. Pallets of gear were strapped down tight. Oxygen kits prepped for Halo. Ava sat across from 2 younger shooters, neither over 30. One glanced at her rifle case, then looked away. The quiet before a drop always felt like breathing underwater. Her pulse stayed low. Her mind didn't. At 05:12, the rear bay doors opened to the dark. The green light blinked once, then twice. Jump at 28,000 feet. Ava was first off the ramp. Her limbs locked tight. Body arched into freefall. Wind roared past her helmet. The oxygen mask rasped in her ears. She counted the seconds by breath. 72, 85. At 12,000 feet, she cut the chute. The canopy snapped open with a sharp pop. She let the wind pull her east, gliding along the terrain. The valley spread out below like a bruise under moonlight. No lights, no signal, no second chances. She stayed low, hugging the elevation, bleeding speed until her boots skimmed the ridgeline. She pulled hard and released, landing in a rough roll behind a broken shale outcrop. Dust rose. She didn't move for 10 seconds. Then she was up, crouched, rifle case slung under her arm. Ava crawled to a vantage point marked in recon photos from 2 days earlier. The rocks were warm from the day's sun, but cooling fast. She unzipped the Barrett M107A1, checked the chamber, and slid the bolt closed with precision. No chatter in the radio. Not yet. She flipped down her PVS-31 night optics, the green bloom revealing the contours of the valley. 7 targets. 1 shot at a time. The first whisper came through comms. "Bravo team in position. Shadow 0. Report status." Ava pressed her mic. "Shadow 0 on Overwatch. Standing by." Her tone was flat, measured. The storm hadn't begun, but she was already inside its eye. At 05:56 or 5:56 a.m., the first silhouette blinked into view through Ava's scope, 940 meters out. The target leaned lazily against a boulder, rifle resting on a bipod, unaware. Mirage shimmered just above the rocks, the waves bending left. About 6 to 8 inches of distortion. She adjusted 1 click right on windage, factored drop at range, and settled her breath. She fired once. The sound folded back into the canyon. The body didn't slump. It just stopped existing in its position. Target 1 down. No confirmation needed. Ava had already moved, shifting 5 meters left, staying ahead of return scan patterns. Her cheek barely lifted off the stock between shots. She reset, found the second heat bloom at 1,100 meters. This one knelt behind a tripod, scanning with optics. Wind gusted stronger than forecast. She noted a 15-degree offset in the Mirage, increased velocity. She held a quarter second early, exhaled slowly, and squeezed. The round hit with a soft bloom of movement, the man folding forward. At 06:09, target 3, 1,320 meters. Mirage more severe here, breaking the profile into a blur. Ava shifted her angle by 2 degrees, trusting the pattern distortion. She aimed through the false line, not the visible one. The shot passed through the shimmer, Found solid bone. No need to confirm. At 06:14, the fourth target moved fast, traversing uphill between ridgelines. Ava tracked stride length, estimated elevation gain. He would crest the edge in less than 3 seconds. She fired on the upswing. The bullet caught him mid-frame. He dropped in silence. At 06:18, she reached a problem. The fifth sniper used a slit window through an outcrop, only muzzle visible. Shielded tight. A direct shot would miss or be deflected. Ava scanned the terrain. Her eyes found an angled slab of shale 10 feet left of the slit. She dialed down, angled the shot, and fired a banked round. The ricochet sent sharp stone fragments into the slit. A sharp yelp cracked through comms, then silence. By 06:22, only 2 targets remained. Number 6 was positioned behind thermal cover at 1,500 meters. Hot air blurred the space around him. Ava waited. A sudden drop in air pressure opened a narrow seam, cold layer between 2 heat walls. 2 seconds. She fired during the dip. The shot threaded clean. She was setting up for the final position when the ridge barked back. A sharp whistle tore past her cheek. The second shot hit her left shoulder, spinning her back. Pain burst white. She rolled to cover. Her breathing broke. Her trigger arm was limp. She reached into her vest, pulled an IR strobe, twisted the cap, and tossed it 10 meters downslope. A faint blink pulsed. Another round detonated against it a second later. Ava didn't wait. She pulled herself sideways with one arm, crawling with her knees, dragging her rifle with her boot. Blood soaked her side. Her left hand trembled, fingers barely responding. She jammed gauze into the wound and wrapped pressure tape in 2 wide circles. Her breath caught. Then she clicked her mic. Shadow 0 hit, still active, engaging final overwatch. There was no response yet, but she knew Boone heard her. And she knew the man waiting on the far ridge wasn't guessing. He was tracking, testing. At 06:27, Ava shifted into a dead angle. She slid the rifle across flat stone, sighted through one eye, and saw the glint of glass behind a rock face. Just the eye. She fired. The round clipped the stone's edge, fragmenting into a sharp fan. One piece found flesh. The eye disappeared. Ridge clear, she rasped. Shadow corridor is live. Boone's voice came through a beat later, calm as stone. Copy. Operators moving. Hold position. Watch for thermal echo. Ava closed her eyes for half a breath, then slid the bolt back. New mag, new line. The watchmaker wasn't done, and neither was she. At 14:45 or 2:45 p.m., the Dirksen Senate office building pulsed with quiet tension behind layers of marble and magnetometers. Ava walked through the north entrance in a full Capitol Police Special Response Team uniform, visor down, badge clean, gait measured. She moved like someone with clearance, clipped and steady, her borrowed ID bouncing on a lanyard just above the chest rig. She passed the first checkpoint without pause. No alarms, no hesitation. The hearing was closed door. Subcommittee on National Security Oversight. Unscheduled. Ashford was set to speak behind layers of legal immunity and high-clearance briefings. She knew the layout. She'd memorized exits, camera placements, field of view ranges for internal security lenses. Everything had a margin. Hers was 4 minutes. At 14:50, she took position at Echo Post, a secondary control point just inside the west corridor overlooking the entrance to hearing room 312. A staffer walked past with a clipboard, not even glancing at her. Another SRT member nodded her way. She nodded back. Nothing about her felt out of place. The handheld scanner in the pocket of the real Echo officer chirped once, then flashed red. Secondary verification pending. One of Ashford's personal security details shifted his stance. He scanned the hallway. His hand hovered over his earpiece. Ava moved before the pattern could lock. She turned her shoulder, blending with a knot of real officers exiting the elevator, keeping her line of sight clear. The camera in her body armor went live, blinking once inside the lens frame. At 14:53, Ashford appeared. He walked with calm confidence, his suit sharp, metals aligned just enough to signal power without vanity. Cameras flashed briefly outside the restricted zone. He waved once, polite, but rehearsed. Inside, he stiffened. The aide on his left handed him a folded slip of paper. Standard protocol for classified prompts. Ashford unfolded it, glanced down. 3 words centered on the page, Sparrowhawk present. For half a second, his jaw didn't move. His eyes didn't blink, but his pupils dilated. Breath hitched. His left hand flexed, fingers curling into the paper. He looked up, scanning, not casually, desperately, searching for the name he'd just seen printed on a kill order 16 years ago in a file labeled non-attributable assets. He found Ava in the hallway. He didn't know it was her. Not yet. But he paused. His smile twitched. The mask cracked. The camera caught everything. Ava didn't flinch. She didn't move. She just watched him watch her. Let the reaction bloom and fracture in real time. At 14:56, security announced a sweep. Capitol Police cleared the upper halls, but Ava was already gone. Uniform stowed, badge wiped, walking calmly out of a fire exit on the south side into a waiting van blocks away. Reeves was driving. Boone sat in the back, watching the live feed on a secure tablet. "You got it?" he asked. Ava nodded once. No bullets. Just truth. That night, encrypted footage hit 3 separate servers, one routed to a trusted DOJ contact, another to a senator with a reputation for voting against party lines, the third to a journalist who'd already survived 4 lawsuits and 1 planted leak. Each packet carried the same subject line: Meridian, Ashford, reaction capture. No accusations, no commentary. Only the face of a man trained in deception, finally caught by the one thing he couldn't fake: recognition. At 08:10 or 8:10 a.m., the range was nearly empty. Morning fog clung to the treetops at the edge of the firing line, softening every outline like the world was still deciding what to become. Ava stood behind bench 12 again. Same bench, same cracked concrete, a new layer of silence. She set the Chaytak M200 down without ceremony. Not to test it. Not to prove anything. Just to feel its weight again. To remember the way metal settled into her palms when the world made more sense through crosshairs than conversation. But she didn't shoulder it. She opened the leather-bound notebook instead. The pages smelled like heat and ink. Her father's handwriting had faded along the edges, but it was still there, stubborn and angular, notes on wind speed and barrel harmonics, margins filled with small thoughts. Then one sentence, barely legible in the crease of the paper. The impossible shot is the one you don't take. Ava traced the line with her thumb, then underlined it softly with the edge of a pencil. No pressure, no flourish, just enough to say she understood. Later that day, at 11:45 or 11:45 a.m., she stood alone at Section 60 of Arlington National Cemetery. The summer heat rose in slow waves off the stone. Her dress uniform was pressed tight at the collar, shoulder still stiff from the scar beneath. She didn't bring flowers, only the flag they'd handed her years ago, folded sharp into a triangle, corners lined like a fire team on parade. She knelt and placed the flag gently at the base of the headstone marked Colonel Thomas Walker. No rank between them now, just silence. She let the moment stretch. No speeches, no closure story, just breath, just ground, just her father's name and the space he left behind. She didn't cry. Not because the grief was gone, but because the noise had finally stopped. The fight had shifted. She wasn't chasing ghosts anymore. And for the first time in years, she didn't need to pull the trigger to know she was still aiming at the right things. She closed the notebook, tucked it under her arm, and turned away from the grave. The wind moved through the trees like a slow salute. Behind her, nothing exploded, nothing broke, and that was the victory.